today is Israel's future according to Bible prophecy. Shall be able. We can't know the future, yet Daniel 12:10 tells us, none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall be able to understand. So Almighty God said, in the days when Great Britain and Russia are powers in the earth, I am coming to the world to put down the thrones of men and to establish my kingdom. How astounding is this? That in 550 BC, Almighty God prophesied the United States of America and where we would come from. I mean, we're talking about 2,300 years in advance. It appears the scriptures tell us, as well as Yossi Balin earlier in 2013 told us, that this will be an interim agreement. As a matter of fact, Balin quoted Netanyahu as saying that he would okay a provisional Palestinian state. So what will be the provisions of this interim agreement? First thing, it will turn the West Bank, which is biblical Judea, Samaria, over to the Palestinians as soon as the agreement is consummated. Furthermore, the Temple Mount is a source of tremendous conflict. That 37 acres, that is the most disputed 37 acres on the planet. Right now, the Muslims worship there. They have the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But this is the holiest place to the Jewish people. This is where their first temple stood, their second temple stood. And so there's a lot of strife over it right now. Well, this agreement is going to put this under a sharing arrangement. Both Muslims and Jews will be able to worship there, and it will be under international supervision.
This week on Jerusalem Dateline, terror strikes the heart of Tel Aviv. Israeli leaders deploy hundreds of soldiers after 2 terrorists kill 4 Israelis and wound several more in a Tel Aviv cafe. Israelis mourn their dead, while some Palestinians cheer the attack. Plus, ISIS continues its reign of terror against the Yazidi people. And a unique garden sends a message of hope and freedom against modern-day slavery. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We're coming to this week from just outside the Damascus Gate, one of the main entrances into the old city of Jerusalem. Right now there's thousands of Muslims coming out of the old city and the Temple Mount on the first Friday of Ramadan. There's a heavy police presence here following the attack in Tel Aviv. That was an attack at a trendy cafe by 2 terrorists who killed 4 Israelis and wounded several more. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised international condemnation of the terror attack, but said the Palestinian Authority had yet to respond.
I heard with appreciation the strong condemnation from the leading capitals of the world for these despicable acts of murder, but I did not hear such a condemnation from the Palestinian Authority.
For the first time since the current wave of terror attacks began last fall, the UN Security Council condemned, in the strongest terms, the Palestinian terror shooting in Tel Aviv that left 4 dead and more than a dozen wounded. The Council said those responsible for these killings should be held accountable. Any acts of terrorism are criminal and unjustifiable, regardless of their motivation, wherever, whenever, and by whomsoever committed. Israeli police were out en masse in Jerusalem during prayers on the Temple Mount on the first Friday of Ramadan. Here at the Damascus Gate, the mood was quiet, as opposed to the celebrations that took place here following the attack. Israel cordoned off the Hebron area village of Yatta and arrested an accomplice to the attack. In this video released by the IDF, soldiers are searching the home of one of the terrorists. Israel also canceled more than 80,000 permits for Palestinians from the West Bank who had hoped to visit holy sites and relatives in Israel during Ramadan. Funerals for the victims took place on Thursday and Friday. But even as Israelis mourned their dead, they showed their resilience, returning to the Sarona market a day after the attack. Some sat in a circle around an Israeli flag, singing songs. Politicians came too.
These were not terrorists in brackets. These were terrorists who came to kill citizens and frighten Israelis and try to break their life cycle. And that's why we are here in Sarona, to show that life continues as usual, and we will not give up, and we will never be deterred by terror.
Netanyahu visited the site of the attack for a second time. Surrounded by incredible security, Netanyahu met the owners of the restaurant and sipped coffee in the trendy Sarona market. While Israelis mourned their dead and wounded, some Palestinians celebrated. For example, the head of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, tweeted, "Glory and salutations to the Hebronites." He also included a victory sign emoji. Hamas said it was just the first surprise in store for Israelis during the month of Ramadan. This footage of applause and cheering comes from Jerusalem Arabs at the Damascus Gate. These pictures are of Palestinians in the West Bank passing out candy to celebrate the attack.
So why are they giving out candies in the street? Because when a population is told that this is what their God wants of them, this is going to bring about the redemption of humanity. Killing the Jews is a condition for the redemption of humanity. So of course, then it's a celebration every time an Israeli is killed.
Itamar Marcus, director of the Palestinian Media Watch, says killings in the recent wave of terror are glorified, not just by Hamas, but also by Fatah, the political party of the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas.
During this entire terror wave, which began in October 2015, the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, the ruling party of Mahmoud Abbas, have given absolute support to the terrorists who murdered 4 Israelis yesterday, who were captured by Israel, are now going to go to jail. And from this day onward, they will now be receiving salaries, monthly salaries from the Palestinian Authority. How can the Palestinian Authority expect the world to believe that they are fighting terror, that they are against terror?
Marcus believes unless the indoctrination stops, murders like the one in Tel Aviv's Sarona market will continue. Christian Broadcasting Network CEO Gordon Robertson condemned the attack and said in a statement that CBN was mourning the deaths of innocent Israelis. He also said every act of aggression against the Jewish people will only fortify our resolve to support their right to have a Jewish state in the land of their forefathers. Just days before the terror attack in Tel Aviv, Israelis celebrated Jerusalem Day. It's the time when Israel liberated their ancient capital during the 1967 Six-Day War. That war changed the face of the Middle East and the world, and many see it also as a fulfillment of prophecy. You're watching a reunion of soldiers who made history. These are the paratroopers who captured the old city and reunited Jerusalem. It marked the first time in nearly 2,000 years that the Jewish people controlled all of their ancient capital. Katja Kahaner helped lead the charge.
I can tell you just one thing that one of the commanders of the Jordan army told me later about the war in Jerusalem. He said, "We fought like lions, but you fought like people that ready to give their life for Jerusalem."
You've sounded a call that's gone through the generations.
The Friends of Zion Museum honored Katja and his men.
It's so important to have them here today, to honor them as heroes, to recognize their efforts on behalf of the Jewish people. So much of what we're doing here today, so much of what we take for granted, might not have been possible without them.
The reunion was just one part of a nationwide celebration of Jerusalem Day. Many see the reunification of Jerusalem as a milestone in history and prophecy.
The prophet Isaiah said about Zion, joy and gladness will be found in it, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. That's exactly what's happening here.
Every time that we walk through a park and see an old couple sitting on a bench, every time that we see a group of young kids playing soccer in Jerusalem, that is the prophecy of Zechariah coming to life before our eyes.
For this band of brothers who liberated the city, it marked their lives.
If somebody asked me, how would I describe my life? I would say Jerusalem. Every time I come to Jerusalem, on the way to Jerusalem, when I go up the hill of the castle, I feel the blossom of my heart. I feel something different.
Jerusalem is part of our history, you know, for sure, and everyone know from the Bible that the stories about Jerusalem. And I'm not religious at all, but I know what we had to do to be homeland of the Jewish people, and that's it.
Up next, hear the heartrending stories of young Yazidi girls and boys when they lived under the shadow of ISIS. When we come back. In some horrific news, ISIS burned alive some 19 young Yazidi girls for refusing sex from their ISIS captors. According to the Syrian news agency ARA, hundreds watched them die in Mosul, Iraq. They were captured in 2014 when ISIS took over large parts of northern Iraq, including Mosul. Here's a story we did late last year about a young Yazidi girl and boy under the heel of ISIS. In just one day, thousands of Yazidis went from living in their ancient homeland to a UN refugee camp like this one. After ISIS captured Sinjar, the main city of the Yazidis, most of them live now in camps like this. Nearly 20,000 live in this one alone. But a few here have made the harrowing escape out of the hands of ISIS.
So when they were selling us girls, the buyer would come in to take his slave. If any of us refused, they would beat us very badly. No one went with the buyers willingly.
ISIS captured this 19-year-old girl who we named Nazda to protect her identity. She spent 10 months as a sex slave after ISIS sold her to an Arab man for the equivalent of $800 US.
The man was really bad. He treated me like an animal. He had 4 wives and they had no sympathy for me. I was beaten and treated very badly.
ISIS tried to convert Nazda to Islam and dealt harshly with anyone trying to help women like Nazda.
They brought 3 men into the ISIS court. They were accused of helping the women who had become Yazidi sex slaves. They killed them, beheaded them in front of us. They showed us that this is the fate of anybody trying to help you.
ISIS also captured hundreds of young boys, including 14-year-old Mamo.
They insulted us and told us we were unclean. They accused us of being blasphemers, unbelievers who didn't believe in Islam or Allah. They taught us the Quran and also trained us how to use heavy weapons. Later they told us we should be jihadists just like them and convert to Islam.
After months of this indoctrination, Mamo miraculously escaped by convincing his captors he was ill. These are pictures of what Mamo escaped. Here you have 32 young Yazidi boys posing with an Islamic State flag, and here they've already graduated. These are meant to be the jihadis of the next generation of the Islamic State. Their goal was clear:
to convert us, then to make us into jihadi, and then kill our own people, the Yazidis.
He also explained what ISIS told them their ultimate goals were.
They said we will not leave any place, even a small part of the world, without Islam.
Nazda heard the same goal.
They told me they are not a state of Mosul or Raqqa or anywhere. They said it's not a small state. Islamic State is a big state and can cover the whole world.
While Mamo escaped ISIS, many Yazidis like Nazda have been rescued through the efforts of men like Abdullah. He acts as a go-between for captured Yazidis by negotiating with their captors.
Before ISIS took over Sinjar, I used to buy and sell things inside Syria. Now, with my relationship with the people in Syria, I use that relationship to rescue people.
So far, Abdullah has rescued at least 138 Yazidis. I asked him the cost to rescue one or two.
It depends. Sometimes we bring them for free without any money, sometimes for just $1,000, sometimes $5,000. It's different.
This is a screenshot that Abdullah showed me from a captured ISIS cell phone. It shows Twitter accounts where ISIS members can communicate between each other to buy and sell sex slaves. The Kurdish government set up this office to help rescue the nearly 6,000 captured Yazidis. So far, Hadi Dabani and his team have helped more than 2,000. They hear horrific stories.
Describing their situation is very, very hard, because some of the girls have told us they have had their hands tied for 3 months, have been harassed and forced to have sex. Imagine having sex with a mother in front of her son and then killing the son.
The plight of one 13-year-old brought Dubani to tears.
I tried very hard to rescue her. She's been married 5 times. She has also been imprisoned.
Success stories like Nazda make their efforts worthwhile, and Dubani pleads for more help.
Is it acceptable that the international community or the UN, who know that nearly 6,000 people have been kidnapped by ISIS and have experienced persecution, harassments, and treated like animals, keep silent? They don't make any steps to help.
The Kurdish offensive that retook Sinjar might alleviate some of their suffering. Until then, many Yazidis, like these small children, remain in refugee camps, and other Yazidis continue to languish in the clutches of ISIS. Coming up, find out what one Middle East expert reveals about a profound change going on inside the world of Islam when we come back. Here in Jerusalem and around the world, Muslims are celebrating the month of Ramadan. That means they fast during the day, no eating, drinking, even smoking, and then they feast at night. It's a reminder there's a profound change going on among many Muslims. Here's CBN News' George Thomas and Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg to discuss a revival going on inside the Islamic world.
Joel, always great to have you on the broadcast. Listen, on your blog, joelrosenberg.com, you referenced that study that shows more Muslims came to Christ between 1960 and 2010 than in any time in history. Tell us why.
Well, it's fascinating, right? We've gone from about fewer than 200,000 Muslim converts to Christianity in 1960 to better than 10 million by 2010. And of course, that was 6 years ago. We believe the trend lines are continuing. Mm-hmm. Look, a lot has happened in the last 50 years in the Middle East. A lot of revolutions, wars, turmoil, poverty. And I think what's happening, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, is many Muslims are getting deeply uncomfortable with the idea that ISIS or Iran's leadership or Assad are the type of people that represent Islam. And many Muslims are saying, look, if that's Islam, if that's real Islam, I'm out.
Would you also say that, there's also more ministry to the Muslim world than ever before?
I think there has been an acceleration of missions work in the Muslim world right at the moment, again, combined with technology, which has allowed fewer people to be able to reach more people with the gospel. I don't think enough people are engaged in Muslim evangelism. I think that's actually still a weakness. But I also believe that God is moving very powerfully using dreams and visions Muslims are having of the man in white, of Jesus Christ himself.
This would be a perfect month because the 1.6 billion Muslims around the world are taking part in what's called Ramadan, their holy month of prayer and fasting. How important is it for Christians to get engaged, praying for Muslims during this very important month for them?
Right at a moment where Muslims, even ones that don't think of themselves as super faithful, but are trying to pray and refrain from eating or drinking all throughout daylight hours for an entire month. This is a moment to be praying for them, that God would begin to open their eyes. That as they're praying for favor from God, that God, the God of the Bible, would in fact give it. But revealing to Muslims, hundreds of millions of Muslims, not just tens of millions, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that we would work with and strengthen ministries that are broadcasting the gospel by satellite television, by radio, by the internet. And then, of course, local believers on the ground who are so persecuted. I think in many ways, the violence that we're seeing on the ground in the Middle East is the physical manifestation of the spiritual battle for souls in the Muslim world.
Talking about violence, what Christians on the ground in parts of the Middle East are facing. In fact, the United States has now labeled this a genocide.
Yes, it is a genocide. What we're watching in Syria, in northern Iraq, is nothing less than genocide. The Islamic State, for example, what we know as ISIS or ISIL, this is a movement specifically, publicly determined to destroy every Christian, every Yazidi, every Muslim that doesn't agree with them. They're being forced to convert to Islam or pay a tax or be murdered or be enslaved. This is what's happening right now. And millions are fleeing the region. But of course, hundreds and hundreds of thousands are dying. More than 400,000 people have died in Syria alone. So this is genocidal proportions. More than 1 million people, Christians, have fled Syria. More than 1 million Christians have fled Iraq. And this is ISIS's goal, is to eradicate Christianity in the lands where the gospel was first preached.
What can the global church do to help brothers and sisters who continue to suffer for their faith in the Middle East?
Sure. Well, preach the gospel and to strengthen our brothers and sisters at this critical hour.
As always, Joel Rosenberg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, George. Great to be with you.
Up next, how a unique garden is getting the word out about one of the most pressing issues of our time. When we come back. Earlier in the show, we saw that there are still thousands of Yazidi women languishing as sex slaves under ISIS. Now a group of modern-day Christian abolitionists are using a world-famous garden show to raise awareness about the issue of modern-day slavery. Dale Hurd reports from London.
A modern slavery exhibit at the world-famous Chelsea Flower Show in London might seem like a stretch, but it was an idea sent from God in a dream, according to Mirabel Galvin, who is a modern-day Christian abolitionist.
He literally spoke to me about slavery in a dream. So then I've been saying, what can I do? How can I best serve in this area? And I also had another dream. I believe in a God who speaks through dreams, and he gave me a dream about doing a garden which spoke about modern slavery.
We caught up with Mirabel's designer, Juliette Sargent, as she was working hard to put the finishing touches on the display.
I wanted to emphasize the fact that modern slavery is a crime that's hidden, whereas old slavery was acceptable for one person to own another person. These days it is illegal, so it's a hidden crime behind closed doors. And I thought the easiest way to do that was simply to have some doors in the garden. So there are front doors, typical English front doors, standing upright in the garden. And they are brightly coloured with lovely planting around the front of them. But then behind those doors, in the centre of the garden, it represents the captive space of modern slaves. So it's dark and there's no plant life.
The modern slavery garden is meant to raise awareness that there are 27 million slaves in the world today. The challenge in fighting the modern slavery movement is that it is largely unseen, out of sight,
and out of mind.
So whether people are working in brothels or nail bars, cannabis farms, agricultural, domestic, all these forms of slavery are largely hidden.
Mirabel is urging Christians to find out if there is slavery in the supply chain of products they purchase by taking a photo of the product and asking the manufacturer through social media with a hashtag #AskTheQuestion.
And obviously one person asking the question isn't a big deal. It's not much pressure on a company. But if 10,000 people are, or a whole army of people are asking the question of a company, is there slavery in your supply chain? Obviously, they're going to have to pay attention.
We're happy to report that Mirabel and Juliet's modern slavery garden was awarded a gold medal. Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
It's encouraging to see there are modern-day Christian abolitionists raising the issue of modern-day slavery. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And remember to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.